This after session is just, we have the privilege of having him here, and Max here, Calder, and this is just like, let's talk business, and, you know, we aren't gonna do this formal presentation, any drivers, but this is at Washington Avenue Advisors, we spend a lot of time working with business owners to help them think through, like, when is the right time to think about positioning for sale, and then how do you optimize valuation before that time? You know, before someone like Max and your company takes them in and says, we're gonna help put you out to market, they've gotta be in a good position and ready for that. And I know you guys have a lot of conversations where you might have to pre-qualify them, or they're not quite ready for that. They haven't thought through the exit readiness of it for personal and the business side. So while we have you, this is open conversation. Nick, I'll have you or Brian just kind of give a brief, like, what we do there, the value builder side, and then we'll tie that in with Max and Brian, and you're talking about when you want to just talk about what we're doing in that space.
Yeah, we have to. So as an organization, we do a lot of work with business owners and entrepreneurs, which is a big reason of what we do today, bringing Brian in. In our experience, what we've seen is most business owners and entrepreneurs don't understand the value of their business and what it's worth. And the importance to that is they don't have knowledge or awareness of the direct impact or the legacy that they can actually have in their personal and professional lives. And helping them understand the value of their business allows us to really explore what that means to them personally, what it means to the clients personally. This is the legacy that I can actually achieve or accomplish while I'm alive. And through that process of understanding value, we've done a lot of work with what's called the capital over the years, and Max would probably echo this. Most business owners don't know the value of their business. Most business owners think the value of their business is actually greater than what it is. And so there has to be some type of reality. And we call it the owner-centric. Most business owners will track their top line revenue, maybe even their profits, sometimes not even that. But really, we want to track the value of the business. That's the ultimate scorecard. That is what you're going to realize when you transition your business. And at some point, a business owner is going to transition their business, whether it's forced upon them or whether it's chosen, they choose to do so. But at some point, your scorecard from an economic perspective is going to be the value of your business when you sell. And by working with a business owner and working with firms like Calder Capital, we're able to understand what the value is in the present day, but then also understand what does the market really allow for. And if you're on the low end of a multiple or a range of value, what do you need to do from a business perspective, from an operation perspective, to move to the higher end so you can command a higher price for the same business? Very similar. I mean, if you think of your house, if you live in a community, you're going to be in a range. Your value is going to be predicted on the community that you live at. Depending on the upgrades and things that you have, you're going to have a different range of valuation when you go to sell your house versus potentially your neighbor. Business is the same way. And so we help business owners identify that. We work with them through the process, connecting them with the appropriate professionals and firms and consultants to help drive that value so that ultimately we can impact the legacy from a wealth management perspective for those owners.
Now, Max, you mind adding into this conversation, because you and your firm take it from there to another level, to the transaction level.
So everyone can breathe easy because most of the transactions we do, the owners have not optimized their business for sale. So it doesn't mean you can't sell if you haven't taken home status. It just means that you're likely to have a less favorable outcome, maybe experience than you could have had. But had you started planning minimum probably 2 years, I don't know if you recommend it, 2 to 5 years, it's difficult to get owners to think that far out sometimes because particularly for small businesses, they're kind of just caught up in day to day. And we talked about a lot of your stuff, just the adventures of putting out the next fire, right? And then suddenly it's like, well, someone's sick, or they hit burnout, or the economy takes a dip, and they haven't prepared, so they just had a suboptimal experience. And I feel like there's pretty much like, we kind of look at 4 areas to look at it. And I think that when you're a startup, I don't think you have to be so concerned about what we would call financial. And we're probably not using the same words. I'm not a SUPA, so when I'm going through class, you can help. But I like to use the phrase financial clarity, and I think part of that is like financial clarity. Can I actually retire? Will I be able to provide the inheritance and legacy, the charitable goals that I want to? And I think from the position of your business to sell, the number one thing I would tell owners that are a couple of years from selling are make sure your financial records are clear and understandable. Don't have errors. Because if you're going to go out and you're going to face the scrutiny of lenders or private equity firms or family offices, and your financials are not correct and understandable, you're going to get mauled out there. Because if you think of one or two items, one or two things that don't add up or don't make sense, throws the entire thing into question, kills the whole deal, right? So the other things I would say are human capital, sales, and partner or family relationships. So I'm happy to dig into those. You don't have to want me to, but I could dominate the entire conversation on those 3 topics. But those are essentially the 4 things that we look at, and then we have time to coach an owner. If we get that, the owner, if it has some forward looking that says, I want to sell in 2 to 3 years, let's do evaluation. Tell me where I am. Now let's talk about what I can improve it. Those are kind of the 4 things that we don't have.
Right, so I was wondering, when you told a little bit about when you sold and how you didn't feel it was for you to take it to the next level. Did you go through any sort of a formal process at the time? Did a broker work with you, or was it just you and the Deckers guys cutting a deal?
Me and the baggage claim.
In the baggage claim?
Yeah, there was another issue that I had. After I got 100% of the company back, I was able to refinance at a much better term than the previous time. But I still had this one investor who wanted to come on, but he didn't. Brian, if I gave him money, I wouldn't see you till you need me. And he was pretty right. And so he brought in this guy who was an ex-CPA, total failure in my books, but this guy worked with him for 20 years in the hospitality industry. And this guy was like a narcissistic piece of work. And it was something that to get the money, he had to come with it. And I dealt with that. If I go into this in my book quite in depth, and you all should read just this portion of it, because it can really affect how you make the decisions. And ultimately, there were 2 issues. One, we were looking at a $25 million season. I knew I couldn't finance it. And most of the reason I couldn't finance it was because of this guy who had inserted himself in the management, level, and pretty much anything that I brought up he would shoot down. And so I have a personality issue within the company, and that made me want to get out. And, like if he stays in this company going to die, I got to get him out. How do I get him out? Get rid of the company.
How did you arrive at the value that you ended up selling or purchasing?
We took a multiple of the sales of the two already.
Okay.
So that was the way we did it. And we did it with 100% cash plus a tail end of royalties. And this guy, after the sale went through, started threatening lawsuits because he wanted the royalties up front. So we ended up buying ourselves out for cash. It was a great deal for me. I don't, regret one bit of it.
Right.
But who knows what might happen.
I'm sure there's people that will ask you, do you wish you'd hold on longer because now UGGs is doing billions in sales. But you seem pretty at peace with where you're at.
I couldn't believe it, but in the airport yesterday in Grand Rapids, I must have seen 20 women wearing UGGs.
It's fall.
So, geez, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and every other person wearing UGGs. So it's like, I got goosebumps just knowing how big it got. Like, you could, two things. Number one, you can pretty much, even the taxi driver's going to have heard of UGGs. And the other thing is, everyone remembers their first
When I told my wife you were coming, she said, oh my gosh, I was way ahead of my time. I bought my first pair of UGGs when I was 16 years old.
Everybody remembers. How many products do you own in your household?
That you remember the first.
It's like the most emotional product. There's something about it. Thank God, because I fucked it up so many times. They kept still wanting, hey, we need another reorder, we need another reorder. So yeah.
You couldn't have made up a better story about the thugs. I saw
Yeah.
that.
Well, I thought that was interesting too, because you didn't create the sheepskin boot.
No.
So that was, to me, one of the most interesting parts of the story that I didn't know when I came in here today.
I didn't
had no idea that you didn't actually create the boot,
Yeah.
but just brought it to America and brought it to market.
And I increased the quality to, like, when the first pairs I would get, like, one would be a real stiff skin and the other one would be like, well, they're sevens. Well, sell them. I can't sell them, they're not the same. Yes, they are, they're sevens. You know? Australians, like, she'll be right, mate, just sell them, you know?
Yeah, let's
Different mentality.
It took years. In fact, I ended up getting a perfect boot. I cut right down the front, across the toe, underneath, and up the back. And I wrote on half of it, I said, minimum quality for the US. And I sent it to the factory, and I kept the other half. And just like that, they started doing it. They just didn't realize they had to, because Australia, my very first pair of UGGs I bought, I had to pick and choose. There's a pile of them on, and I had to find a pair.
It's like produce in the market.
I
Some of them are
had to
rotten.
find a pair that had the same color braid and the same.
Wow.
To make one good enough to wear as one pair.
Yeah.
And then I found it interesting that the fact that you were able to bring it to market and get where you were, that by the time other people like Thugs were trying to come in, you had already created enough of a name for yourself and a relationship with those customers that you had a little bit of protection there for, again, a product that you didn't even create.
Yeah, and it's unprotectable. You can't patent the shoe, and you can't patent the color or design. But we had a mantra in the company, which I instilled in everybody. We get out front first and then run faster. And we kept that up year after year, because every time we put a new line out at a trade show, all the Asians would come in, cameras, so you knew they were going to have that on their tables next season. So by the time we got to the next trade show, we had to have come up with completely new, innovative colors, styles, and whatever. So we were always ahead by a season, and that was a big survival. So it was a little.
I probably a really naive question. So I always associate UGGs with winter. Right? So I'm not a surfer. So how did you become associated with surfing in Australia? Why?
Or California.
Okay, well, tell you, why do surfers want that?
Well,
Their feet get cold. And
the water in California is frigid. Right? It's really cold. And you nearly always get out of the surf with numb feet.
Okay.
And so by putting sheepskin boots on, number one, it wicks the moisture. So even if your feet are wet or damp, within 10 minutes your feet are dry, and eventually they're going to warm up. So they're very practical, but you don't have to surf to wear it. Eventually people will realize, oh my God, they want something.
That was the piece he was saying, he almost had to educate the U.S. market that what sheepskin is capable of.
Yeah.
Australians knew it.
Yeah, that's a good segue into the most successful. Oh, I quietly to that. So please just humor me. And so she did. She was wearing Reeboks, with those little socks. She took them. I said, "Take your socks off." Yeah. And eventually, it was like she put them on, and she goes, "Oh my God!" And that's the term I've heard more than any other term. Oh my God! I could put these in the after-ski department. And she bought, about 180 pairs, right? And that was more than our previous year's sales. And I realized the power of one store. Why did she do that? It's because she tried them on. And that spun back to the retail store I was in. And I realized we don't ever try and sell a pair of UGG boots until the person's put them on. Mm-hmm. And so I created a 6-pair stocking plan, which was, if a store buys 6 pairs, I'll give a free pair to the manager, right? So, and the next time I was in a store like that, hey, what are these like? Oh, they're the best things in the world. Man.
I'm wearing them right now.
They're expensive. No, but they're so much value. And it was a complete turnaround once they tried the product on. So that turned out to, it cost me, probably 100 free pairs, but it was nothing compared to the return on the sales.
Rachel told me she bought her first pair. I think it's those ones that I had over there for the pictures. She said she bought them at that little footwear store in East Lansing by Campus Corners. Do you remember that little? Kind of, they had Birkenstocks. Yep. They had weird. It was like a little.
Barely anything, but
barely anything.
But
they had Uggs.
Yeah.
And she was 16 years old. I don't want to age her, but that was 32 years ago. So she was 16 years old, and she said her parents wouldn't buy it for her, but she put them on at that little footwear store, and she said she couldn't take them off. She's like, it was $160 16 years ago, so what would that be today?
That's $300, $400.
For a 16-year-old, she said, I spent the money. She's like, and I still have them today, and they're the most comfortable thing I've ever had.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And sockless, huh? That's how you wear them?
Yeah, never socks. Yeah.
Wow, see, I'm learning a lot.
That'll stop there.
I'm gonna go buy a pair of. I see some slippers. I might be into those.
Start wearing them around the house,
cool.
And then eventually you'll feel like going out in the wild.
Right down
when you
the
get
word
confident enough.
Tasman. Tasman. Go buy those.
Okay.
You'll never regret it.
Tasman.
Yeah. It's a slipper, but I wear them to the supermarket. I wear them everywhere.
We live in East Lansing, so you can pretty much wear anything.
Yeah, it's a hippie town.
We got enough students around town that you can show your pajamas.
Pajamas
so,
and.
It's true. You'll always see plenty of people in pajamas at the store.
Amazing.
Right. Here and over in LA too.
Yeah.
That's great. Any?
I have a question for you, Brian.
Sure.
Thugs came about because you had, essentially one supplier.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
had, was it George and?
Yeah.
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 And as an owner, that's a challenge, just to have
Yeah.
one supplier, one client, whatever it is, that has an impact on the value of your business. Like, when you started, you knew, you thought you were going to be an instant millionaire, so you were going to have,
Right.
you were going to grow this business to be big and have lots of success. You never envisioned just having one supplier, I would imagine.
I know where you're going with that, and I always knew I was going to have a bust up with George, because in his mind, he's opening up the American market, right?
Yeah.
And he had no idea what I was going through on this end to try and make it work. He was just filling my orders, right? And I knew at some point that I would exceed his capacity, and there was going to be a blow up. And it happened. It happened, yeah. But I did have a group in New Zealand, Canterbury Sheepskin in Christchurch, and they were really, really strong supporters of me. And they were making a much more high-end version, like all the really high-quality ones were coming from New Zealand. And he was the reason I was able to stay alive, because he would give me credit, and he was the first bill I always paid. So he kept me alive during that period where I was, 8 months of not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the time you ended up selling the company, how many how many manufacturers were you working with?
I had four.
Four.
Yeah, and they were all in Australia or New Zealand.
Okay.
And then Decker's, they had strong manufacturing in Asia, and so they took the manufacturing to Asia, but they still, and to this day, they still use Australian and New Zealand sheepskin because it's the gold standard of it's got the greatest benefits of the strength of the skin to stand upright, but also the softness of the fleece. Like American skin's really stiff, but it's wire, it's just shitty fleece, It's uncomfortable. And the Italian skins are, great for gloves, and stuff, but not for footwear.
So that brings another kind of difficult situation when you need to have multiple suppliers to make sure that you always have a supplier and don't overdo capacity, but then to have consistency across your product.
Yeah.
Right? Because now all of a sudden, if you've got multiple suppliers, you want to make sure that your product's consistent. I can't have his Uggs different from mine.
Exactly. So you have to give different styles to different manufacturers.
Okay.
That was the secret.
That style.
That was the secret. They only make this style. They'll never make this classic. And the classics are always going to go to this other. So there was ways to sort of protect yourself, but nevertheless, it was very specific. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Well, this conversation can go anywhere. I have a curious question. Has there been a vegan version for all the vegans yet? I mean, you're from California, and
Let me tell you this. There's this PETA.
that's what I was wondering
Right.
with the PETA movement.
PETA movement.
They might not like you.
They send
The
me.
wool part's fine, but
Someone in PETA put out a video of these sheep being mistreated, and it showed the shearing, the really rough shearing, and they were cutting the sheep, and there was all this bleating, and it was just horrible, And then there's the normal thing is there's a chute that they push the sheep down after it's been sheared, and they were throwing them down backwards and twisting them around and everything. It was a horrific video. It's nothing to do with us. We are recyclers of skins after the sheep's been killed for the meat industry, right? So lamb is shipped all over the world. Huge amounts go to the Middle East, right, because of the religious things there. We have nothing to do with shearing sheep. And yet PETA said, oh, this is what UGG does to their sheep. And it was so fucked up. But no, if we didn't use the skins, they'd be buried in a landfill.
Right.
And nobody gets that part of the story out.
I was wondering if you had to do a lot of PR and education on that in the U.S., if you ever had to combat that.
Let's just say Pamela Anderson. She was so anti-sheep, but then she didn't know the story either. She was going on the PETA video. But the bottom line is it wasn't that big a deal. And I can't answer whether Decker's Corporation did any vegans. We've done a vegan with our sash bag because mostly it's lamb leather, but we've done a vegan version of that, and it's really good. But I don't know of any vegan UGG boots.
I'm working with a founder out in Kansas City she's got a vegan luxury footwear line.
Oh, okay.
It's made out of like coconut shell, and they make them out of different things. They're really trying hard to find an alternate solution.
Yeah, it's tough to get into that because when you look back at what I did, the product was secondary. The branding was what I did. I made it so that every little kid in the US wanted to, Mom, all the kids at school got UGG boots. You've probably all got kids that did the same to you,
Well, no,
right?
what it is today, it's Apple phones.
Right.
It's Apple. They want
Yeah.
my 11-year-old.
And I deliberately targeted them.
Yeah.
Right? And it's, that's why TikTok targets those same people. It's like, it's never ending.
Yeah.
And so the branding was what I ended up being very, very good at, was figuring out how I can make it attractive to certain groups.
So I have a question on that. So you talked about being terrified of sales.
Yeah.
Right, at first. I feel like we recruit a lot of young people, and almost none of them are interested in sales out of the gate.
Right.
Do you have any, and you discovered that you enjoyed sales.
Yeah.
What would you say to the young people today that have not really thought about that as their future? Is there something you'd recommend that they try, or how do they find out whether that is inside of them?
To become a salesperson as a career, or just
even know that
handle
you
the
like
sales for their existing startup.
Well, that too, I think
Yeah.
sales is obviously one of the hardest parts about starting a business. Because you have to put
Yeah,
yourself out there.
yeah. Number one, well, there's a couple of things. Number one, you have to love your product. Right? If you don't love it, you can't. It's just bullshit.
People can tell.
Yeah, and you're going to lose interest, and you're not going to believe in yourself. So you got to love your product or service. It could be a software service or something like that. The other thing is that you have to really know your product, because you're going to get asked questions all the time, and if you get caught out, well, that's a learning experience, right, for the next one. But you're not going to get a sale there if you don't know the answers. So knowing your product and loving your product, then it doesn't become sales anymore. It's information sharing, and it's like you're missing out if you don't do this. If there's lots of different ways you can sort of angle it. You guys had Matthew Pollard here, right?
Yeah.
He was brilliant at integrating that sales. He's much better than I am to talk about the sales process. But I can whip him on making people want it before I even have to sell it. That's the difference.
Well, it's a treat to have you for a little extra session here and
Yeah.
sit down.
Yeah, it's
Anybody
really
got
cool.
anything else for the founder of the iconic UGGs here?
I've got to ask, 2 a.m. call, Gordon's saying, fuck George.
Yeah.
You didn't try to get a piece of the company at that point?
No, he was all about selling skins, yeah.
Just for the sake of getting back at
Yeah, and it was like very righteous indignation, like, fuck him.
Yeah.
You don't treat somebody like that.
Yeah.
You should have at least told him,
Do you think in this era, do you think that same dynamic in the supplier, do you think they would try to get a piece?
Yeah, the hardest part of a product business is when you're really successful, because you outstrip your ability to use your capital over and over and over again. So keeping up with, we were doubling every year, and at 100,000 you can double to 200,000, but you get to 5 million and 10 and then 20. The multiples become so much more difficult, and quite often the suppliers, like any golfers here, do you know the name Ashworth?
Yeah.
Ashworth, clothing. Yeah. He's a good buddy of mine. In fact, we started at the same time in San Diego, and whenever I was in the shit, he was doing good, and we'd bootstrap it, and then 6 months later, so he designed golf clothing, and he built got a partner in, money partner, and built it up to about 300 million, and this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, which is a huge company for then, and eventually the mills that supply all the garment material, whether it's t-shirts or crew necks or whatever, they start to think, well, fuck, it's 400 million, and what do we need you for, John? We've got the business supplying going on, and so they cut him out, him and his investor. So he started a second one, and he ended up getting Quicksilver to invest in the beginning of it, and then Quicksilver sold out to TaylorMade, and then it became a $500 million business, and the mills go, well, shit, thanks, Joe, we don't need you anymore. And so now he's on his third one, which is a company called Link Soul, which is, he's still maintains 100% of that one. But the biggest problem when you're starting a product-based business is your success, because the manner, this sash bag, we jumped from 4 to 7 million, and now the manufacturer, who's also doing a lot of financing, is starting to call the shots, and it's deja vu for me. I've got my radars up on what's about to happen. So we've got to find ourselves new manufacturers and different sources of financing, like ASAP.
How will you help? It's a female founder there
Yeah.
you're working with. How
Yeah.
will you help her decide? You're a partner in it, or you're a co-founder.
I've got a small piece of it, yeah.
How are you going to help her with everything you know and you've seen these problems coming? How are you going to help her decide when it's time to think about selling?
I hate to answer this, not the selling part, but how am I going to help her? When I met her, nearly 10 years ago, I thought, oh, it's perfect. It's lamb. I understand how hard it is to get the raw material. I understand how hard it is to knock off. She's got a brilliant design. This is like Uggs all over again. I can really help her avoid all the pitfalls. Well, fuck, we've hit every pothole. Every single pothole that I did with Ugg.
She's like, what good are you?
No, well,
It's not about avoiding it, but about you've been there before.
I've been there before, and I've been able to see it coming and help, minimize the thing. But the thing is, the business has a life of its own. It has needs, and depending on what size the business is, it requires certain things. And a lot of it's financing, a lot of it's sometimes marketing, sometimes, there's always